For 12 years, no one in the Gulf trusted a diver more than him. Then 14 experts vanished from these oil rigs without a trace. Now, a flawless veteran breaks his silence about what is really lurking at 180 feet. It watches. It marks. It decides who comes back. If deep-sea mysteries like this hook you, hit subscribe now. The data denies simple accidents, and what follows questions everything the industry fears most. 14 commercial divers are missing from Gulf of Mexico oil rigs in just 5 years. Not a single body has been recovered. These disappearances all fall within the same working band, between 100 and 300 feet, a depth range where surface-supplied divers handle routine inspections and urgent repairs. Each case was logged as a standard job: pipeline checks, riser maintenance, clearing fouling from the rig's steel jacket. Every diver was equipped with a hardwired umbilical for gas and comms, standby support on deck, and a clear decompression plan. The protocols are strict, the training relentless, and the margin for error is supposed to be razor thin. Yet the official records show a pattern no one can write off as coincidence. Names vanish from crew manifests. Coast Guard casualty summaries list unrecovered beside the diver's ID and timestamp. Internal incident logs note the same water depth, the same remote sectors, the same silence at the edge of comms range. Families receive compensation, sometimes quietly, sometimes after weeks of confusion and incomplete explanations. No diver is declared dead without a fight, but the ocean keeps its secrets. In the technical manuals, the risk of not coming back is acknowledged but rare. Fatalities usually mean an umbilical snag, a catastrophic gas loss, or a medical emergency, events that leave evidence, debris, or at least a trace. But in these 14 cases, there is nothing left to recover. No gear, no bubbles, no final distress call. Only a diver's last known depth, logged at the edge of the working envelope, and another entry in the Coast Guard's list of unresolved losses. The pattern is undeniable, and it's forcing crews and companies to confront a problem that protocol alone cannot explain. If deep-sea mysteries hook you, hit subscribe now. The diver at the center of this story had a reputation that traveled ahead of him on every contract. 12 consecutive years offshore in the Gulf, not a single safety infraction or missed decompression stop on his record. In the HR files, his name appears beside a neat row of safety awards, commendations for calm decision-making during line tangles, a letter from a supervisor after he pulled a trapped welder free from a collapsing riser, and a certificate marking 5,000 incident-free hours at depth. Colleagues called him the Ghost, not because he was distant, but because he always seemed to slip through trouble untouched, appearing in the right place at the right time when things went wrong. Supervisors trusted him with the trickiest jobs, clearing fouled lines in zero visibility, inspecting cracked welds during hurricane season, and working late shifts when the deck was slick and the wind threatened to push men overboard. He was the diver crews wanted in the water when a routine job started to unravel. Never rattled, never late on a gas check, always first to notice a missing tool or a loose fitting. His logbooks show a pattern, double-checking gauges, confirming communications, and running extra pre-dive drills when new hands joined the crew. Offshore, where mistakes stack up fast, that kind of discipline is rare. The nickname stuck after an incident on the North Star platform when he surfaced alone after a sudden blackout, having untangled both himself and a panicked rookie without a word of complaint. The company sent him a plaque. His crewmates started calling him the Ghost in the galley, half in awe and half in relief. No one expected him to walk away mid-shift, least of all after a standard pipeline inspection in familiar water. That decision, leaving behind the job, the paycheck, and a spotless record, sent a ripple through the tight-knit world of Gulf divers. It was not fear or carelessness that drove him out. Something happened at depth that shattered the rules he had trusted for over a decade. If deep-sea mysteries like this hook you, hit subscribe now. The assignment that day was a textbook pipeline inspection on Sector 7, a job the crew could do in their sleep. The plan called for 2 divers in rotation, but the usual partner Johnson never made it to the staging area. A sudden bout of food poisoning had left him curled up in his bunk, half-conscious, while the medic logged his symptoms and notified the supervisor. That left only one working diver cleared for depth, with a standby suited up and waiting topside. Company policy allowed solo descents only when every safeguard was in place: hardwired communications, a fully tested umbilical, and a standby diver ready to drop at a moment's notice. The surface team ran through the checklist twice. Gas mix analyzed, pressure gauges zeroed, communications tested for clarity, helmet seals checked for leaks. The diver ran his own checks again, fingers brushing each valve and fitting, eyes fixed on the pressure dials. He confirmed the umbilical connection, tapped the helmet mic, and called out his name and depth target, his voice crackling back through the speaker. If deep-sea mysteries like this hook you, hit subscribe now. Every step was logged on the supervisor's clipboard, every reading called out and confirmed. The standby diver waited on deck, helmet in hand, ready to descend if anything went wrong. In the control van, the supervisor tracked the diver's location and air supply on a digital console, watching for any sign of trouble. The rules were strict. No one entered the water without backup, and every minute at depth was planned down to the last breath. Even with a missing partner, the operation moved forward. The Gulf does not wait for perfect conditions, and neither do the companies that work its rigs. The diver stepped onto the platform and clipped his umbilical to the descent line, ready to drop into clear water. Standard procedure, standard risks, until the moment when routine gave way to something no protocol could cover. He dropped through the blue, every breath echoing inside his helmet, the world above shrinking into a thin silver band. At 180 feet, the water in Sector 7 was unusually clear, 60 feet of visibility, almost unheard of for that stretch of the Gulf. Sunlight knifed down in pale shafts, picking out the crossbeams and barnacled joints of the rig. Schools of amberjack moved in slow arcs, their scales flickering green and gold as they circled the shadowed steel. Grouper hung motionless in the lee of a riser, watching him pass. He swept his light along the pipeline, checking for telltale signs of a leak. No bubbles, no shifting sand. The only sounds were the distant pop of shrimp and the low, steady hum of pumps filtering up from the surface. Every so often, a radio check crackled in his ear, the supervisor's voice clipped and routine. For 20 minutes, the job unfolded exactly as the manual described. Then, without warning, the ocean changed. The shrimp clicks stopped. The hum of the pumps seemed to fade, swallowed by a pressure that pressed in from all sides. Every fish in view, amberjack, grouper, even the territorial damselfish that never leave their coral, vanished at once, darting into the rig's shadows or disappearing into open water. It was not a slow retreat. One moment the water was alive with movement. The next, it was empty, as if something had swept a hand across the reef. He paused, senses straining. The silence was thick, unnatural, not just the absence of sound, but a kind of hush that settled over the entire site. Even the current felt different, sluggish and heavy. Years of experience told him that fish do not clear out like that, unless there is a predator nearby, something big enough to unsettle the whole food chain. But when he scanned the water column, there was nothing. No shark, no barracuda, not even the flicker of a tail at the edge of his light. He checked his gauges again, every movement deliberate. The numbers were steady. The umbilical line stretched back to the platform, taut and reassuring. But the feeling in his gut was new, a warning impossible to ignore. In the manuals, silence means trouble. In the Gulf, it can mean you are not alone. A faint static hiss replaced the supervisor's voice. The diver tapped his helmet mic, then the comms panel. Nothing. No feedback, no carrier wave, just dead air. The umbilical was intact, pressure steady, oxygen flow perfect. Every instrument confirmed it. Yet the line felt as if someone had cut the world above away. He checked his depth, 181 feet. The silence pressed in, heavy and absolute. Years of training had drilled him to expect comms dropouts in rough water or near thick steel, but this was different. The system had passed every pre-dive check. The standby diver topside should have heard his every breath. Instead, the only sound was the slow rasp inside his helmet. He swept his light along the pipeline again, searching for a reason. The beam cut through empty water, revealing nothing but the smooth curve of the trench below. Then, deep in the darkness, a dull blue-green glow flickered to life. It started as a pinprick, far beneath the rig's crossbeams, almost lost in the silt haze. The light pulsed, swelling and shrinking in measured intervals, as if the water itself was breathing. Each pulse sent a ripple through the trench, illuminating the edges with a cold, unnatural clarity. The glow held its shape. The glow didn't behave like any known bioluminescent organism. It didn't scatter or drift with the current. Instead, it held its shape, tight, geometric, and impossibly regular. The diver's helmet camera recorded the faint shimmer as the glow grew brighter, rising slowly from the trench floor. The water temperature dropped by several degrees, confirmed by the digital readout on his wrist. His suit's heating coils kicked in, fighting the sudden chill. The geometry felt wrong for biology. He tried the radio again, voice steady but urgent. No response, no static, not even the faintest click. The entire comms system might as well have been unplugged from reality. He checked the umbilical once more. No kinks, no tension, no sign of a break. The line was as solid as ever. Yet every attempt to reach the surface was swallowed by the silence. The glow continued to rise, expanding and contracting in a steady rhythm. It was too bright, too focused to be a trick of the light. The diver's pulse hammered in his ears, each breath fogging his visor. He knew the manual. Instrument failure at depth means abort. But the glow below made retreat feel like walking away from something that wasn't finished with him. The water between him and the surface suddenly felt impossibly thin. Whatever was rising from the trench wasn't a malfunction. It was a presence, deliberate, measured, and aware. The thing rising from the trench defied every category the diver knew. 20 feet across, its lattice of interlocking planes shifted and folded with a precision that felt both mechanical and impossible. Each angle seemed to move with intention, as if the structure itself was thinking. The surface was flawless and mirrored, swallowing the beam from his helmet and scattering it into fractured patterns that danced across the silt. He hovered above it, suspended in a moment where the familiar rules of shape and space no longer applied. The geometry was alive, but not in any way he understood. Cold crept through his suit, the water pressing closer as the structure rotated beneath him. He checked his gauges, but the numbers slipped away, replaced by images that were not his. He saw the rig from below, its lights flickering through the waves, men moving across the catwalks, faces he knew, glimpsed from impossible angles. Time twisted, days and nights on the platform, replaying out of sequence, memories that belonged to someone or something else. The sensation of being watched was unmistakable, but it was not fear. It was recognition, as if he had become the observer and the observed in the same instant. The geometry pulsed in time with his heartbeat, drawing him closer. Instructions for aborting the dive unraveled in his mind, replaced by corridors flooded in blue-green light, stairwells spiraling into darkness, hands reaching for a hatch that never opened. Each breath felt foreign, his body a guest inside the suit. The urge to let go of the ascent line and drift downward grew stronger, the surface above suddenly distant. He squeezed his eyes shut, counting backward, gripping the line until his hands ached. When he looked again, the structure waited, unblinking, unmoving. Training offered nothing for this, no protocol for when the threat came from inside. Years later, he would remember the trance that followed, surfacing with every detail intact. The certainty that something had entered his mind, mapped his fears, and then released him lingered long after. He never dove again, not because of what he saw, but because of what he brought back. The diver entered the captain's office, water still dripping from his suit, helmet under one arm, logbook in hand. He slid the log across the desk. Pressure readings, gas mixes, depth times, every entry initialed. 5 gas checks, all within protocol, each confirmed by the topside standby. Oxygen, nitrogen, helium ratios were exactly as required for a 180-foot dive. The diver's voice was steady. He listed each step, gas analyzed before descent, mix confirmed on the panel, standby verified readings at 10, 30, 50, and 70 feet. No contamination, no unexplained drop in supply. Every gauge matched the supervisor's board. The captain did not bother to look at the numbers. He leaned back, arms folded, and offered the routine explanation. You were alone at depth. That is a lot of pressure. Narcosis can make a man see things, hallucinate. You know the risk at 180 feet. The diver did not blink. I know narcosis. This was not it. I checked my gauges every 3 minutes. I logged every stop. I called out my depth and time. There is no confusion in the record. The gas mix was clean. I ran the analyzer myself and the standby confirmed the readout. The captain's finger hovered over the keyboard, ready to check the box for probable narcosis. He did not ask for the analyzer log or the supervisor's clipboard. The diver pressed on. Look at the communications log. There is a 7-minute gap. The radio went dead, but the umbilical was intact. I checked the connectors twice. The panel showed full power. That is not narcosis. The captain's tone hardened. Equipment glitches happen. You were under stress. Write it up as a communications dropout, finish your statement, and take the rest of the shift off. The diver stared at the incident form. I am not signing off on narcosis. I want the actual logs attached, my gas checks, analyzer data, surface panel readouts. If you are calling it operator error, show me where I went wrong. The captain closed the folder. You followed protocol. Sometimes things go sideways. That is all. But the diver knew what he had seen at depth could not be written off as a bad mix or stress. He left, logbook in hand, the captain's unsigned report on the desk, 5 verified gas checks, a dead radio, and something waiting in the trench, buried in the margins of the log. The diver's questions about Johnson set off a quiet scramble. The captain radioed the crew quarters, expecting a groggy answer, or at least the sound of movement. Instead, Johnson's bunk was untouched, the blanket still folded, the dive bag missing, the locker door ajar. The medic's log showed a single entry: food poisoning, administered anti-nausea meds, advised rest. But the timestamp was nearly 12 hours old. No one on shift could remember seeing Johnson after the previous evening's muster. A quick check of the personnel roster revealed another gap. Peters, a diver who had supposedly left on the last supply boat 3 days earlier, had an empty bunk and missing gear. The manifest listed him as off-site, but the supply boat captain later confirmed he had never boarded. The rig's safety officer pulled up the closed-circuit television archive, expecting to settle the confusion. Instead, several key segments were missing. Corridor feeds between midnight and dawn showed only static, and the camera at the main stairwell had been offline for scheduled maintenance. The last clear image of Johnson was from the galley, hours before his illness was logged. Peters appeared on deck 2 nights earlier, but there was no footage of him leaving the platform or transferring to the supply boat. A gear audit turned up more questions. 2 sets of dive equipment were unaccounted for: suits, communications helmets, bailout bottles. The maintenance chief insisted all gear was checked in after each job, but the logbook had blank lines where Johnson and Peters should have signed. The supervisor's notes flagged the absence as a clerical error, but no one could explain why both men's personal effects were gone while their names still appeared on the duty roster. Crew members whispered about ghost shifts and men who walked off platforms without a word. The official incident logs offered only boilerplate, personnel missing, presumed departed, no evidence of foul play. But in the gaps, missing footage, unsigned gear, empty bunks, there was a pattern too familiar to ignore. The cost was not just numbers on a spreadsheet. Every absence meant a family waiting for news, a team running shorthanded, and a safety officer forced to write another incomplete report. The human toll was measured in silence and the weight of unanswered questions. Across the Gulf's remote rig sector, incident summaries began to stack up in ways no safety officer could ignore. Reports from 3 platforms in the same lease block described divers going missing on routine jobs, each case logged as an isolated event, each blamed on fatigue, stress, or accidental falls. The language in official statements shifted from technical to vague, unaccounted for at depth. Last seen near the pipeline riser, presumed overboard, recovery unsuccessful. In the internal logs, a different pattern took shape. Supervisors flagged abrupt silences on the communications channels, unexplained gear shortages, and crew lists that did not match the bunk checks. Divers who vanished were often last assigned to night shifts or solo inspection runs, always from 100 to 300 feet. Maintenance chiefs noted missing helmets and bailout bottles, equipment signed out but never returned, with paperwork left unfinished. The Coast Guard's casualty lists grew longer, but the explanations stayed thin. Regulators pressed the operators for answers. In closed-door meetings, company representatives cited mental health, weather, and the inherent risks of deep-water work. They pointed to the manuals. Every diver trained, every protocol followed, every incident reviewed. But the numbers refused to add up. 14 unrecovered divers across 5 years, no bodies, no debris, and no clear pattern in the official files, except for the depth and the sector. Insurers demanded more detail. Families pushed for full investigations, only to receive redacted reports and settlement offers with strict confidentiality clauses. Some payouts arrived before the final search was called off. Offshore, the rumors spread faster than the paperwork. Crews whispered about the rigs where the water went silent, where fish vanished and lights flickered below the structure. Some claimed to have seen strange glows in the trench. Others spoke of men who walked to the platform rail in the middle of the night and never returned. Supervisors rotated staff more frequently, but the gaps kept appearing. Internal emails debated whether to halt operations or report the anomalies to federal agencies, weighing the cost of a shutdown against the risk of another disappearance. Comment below if you have seen patterns in official stories that do not quite add up. No one could say, on record, what was happening at 180 feet. But the pattern grew too clear for coincidence. The silence in the logs, the missing gear, the erased names, each pointed to something operating beyond protocol. Regulators, faced with conflicting statements and mounting pressure, began to question whether the official narrative could hold. The stakes were not just corporate liability or lost production anymore. They were about public safety, and the growing sense that the Gulf's deep-water rigs had become the front line in a mystery no one wanted to name. Bermeja Island once appeared on every serious map of the Gulf. For centuries, Spanish and later Mexican navigators marked its low, reddish outline north of the Yucatan Peninsula, a fixed point in a shifting sea. When hydrocarbon surveys swept the region in the 1990s, Bermeja's coordinates still defined the edge of Mexico's exclusive economic zone, anchoring claims to a crescent of deep-water territory. But in 2009, a joint government survey arrived at the charted spot and found nothing. No land, no shoal, not even a submerged rise large enough to have hosted an island in living memory. Bathymetric scans showed only flat seabed and a scattering of silt ridges. The official explanation was a mapping error, a centuries-old mistake repeated until it became accepted fact. The timing, though, raised questions no one could answer with a straight face. Bermeja's disappearance cleared the way for new boundary agreements with the United States, agreements that unlocked billions in offshore drilling rights across the so-called Western Polygon. Lease blocks that would have fallen under Mexican control suddenly shifted north, just as deep-water exploration ramped up. Oil companies moved quickly, staking claims along the vanished island's former line. Drilling records show the first wells in the sector spudded within months of the new treaty, targeting reserves mapped decades earlier, but left untapped while the border was in dispute. Internal emails among geologists and legal teams debated whether Bermeja had ever existed, or if it had slipped beneath the waves in a storm, lost to subsidence or a sudden surge. Some argued for a new survey, others pushed to accept the blank chart and move forward. In the end, the absence of evidence became the evidence itself. By 2010, Bermeja was officially erased from Mexican maritime charts. The rigs that followed now sit directly over what would have been its southern shoals, an accident of history, or a convenience for those with the most to gain. Boundary lines were redrawn, drilling accelerated, and the sector's deep trenches, once marked as hazards, became prime real estate for high-stakes extraction. The shadow of Bermeja lingers, a gap in the record that no one can fill, and a reminder that in the Gulf, what disappears from the map can shape everything that happens after. Remotely operated vehicle technicians working the sector's trench logged a series of anomalies that never entered the official incident reports. In archived video files, every frame is stamped with depth and coordinated universal time, showing the vehicle's descent along the pipeline at 183 feet. The water temperature, recorded by the onboard conductivity temperature depth probe, plummets by nearly 5 degrees in under a minute, far sharper than the slow gradients typical for Gulf thermoclines. A technician's voice, audible over the comms, notes the sudden chill and requests a check for gas leaks, but the methane sensors read 0. On the sonar console, a dense return appears just off the trench edge, shaped like a segmented arc with 4 distinct protrusions. The appendages maintain spacing and orientation across multiple pings, even as the remotely operated vehicle shifts position. The operator toggles between standard and high-frequency modes, expecting to resolve a bundle of cables or a school of fish. But the echo holds its geometry, 20 feet across, with no trailing debris or visible movement. The audio feed picks up a rhythmic pulse, cycling every 12 seconds, outside the range of known thruster harmonics or pipeline pumps. Engineers later review the wave files and compare them to reference libraries. There is no match for dolphins, whales, or machinery. The anomaly persists for 7 minutes, then vanishes as the remotely operated vehicle climbs back toward the rig. The mission log exported with full metadata shows no gaps or edits. File hashes match the rig's archival backup, and the navigation overlay pinpoints the event within 50 meters of where the diver later reported the geometric light. Internal emails between remotely operated vehicle supervisors debate whether to flag the incident as a sensor fault or submit it for outside review. One message suggests deleting the segment to avoid unnecessary questions from the client. The original files, however, survived in a technician's private archive, complete with overlays showing the cold spot, the pulsing sonar return, and the exact timestamp. These hard-recorded anomalies became the first data points that suggested something in the trench was more than a trick of light or stress under pressure. Boardroom minutes from the spring of 2026 show a sector-wide freeze on diving operations, an emergency measure that bypassed the usual review process and locked out crews for weeks. The official rationale cited persistent technical anomalies, non-compliance risk, and unresolved safety concerns at depth. Senior managers debated whether to keep sending divers down after the latest incident. One director wrote that they could not rule out further loss of life and recommended immediate suspension pending third-party review. The cost of halting production in that sector exceeded $50 million, a figure confirmed in quarterly filings and flagged by external auditors as an unusual impairment. Thermal imagery from late-stage ROV surveys revealed cold zones clustering near the rig foundations, shapes that shifted position between dives, never matching the outlines of known equipment or marine life. One report described a mobile thermal void hovering at 180 feet, interfering with both communications and navigation. Engineers ran diagnostics on the ROV systems, expecting to find electrical faults or sensor drift. The equipment checked out. The anomaly persisted. In a closed executive session, the board reviewed side-by-side overlays, diver disappearance logs, ROV interference patterns, and the mounting tally of missing gear. The conclusion was blunt. No further personnel would be risked until a cause could be identified, and no outside agency would be notified until legal cleared the language. The shutdown order was quietly circulated, marked confidential, and the sector was mothballed within a month. Contractors were paid out, equipment was staged for removal, and the remaining crew rotated off with non-disclosure agreements in hand. The official press release cited routine maintenance and asset optimization, but inside the company, the decision was understood as a line in the sand, an admission that something at depth had forced their hand. The witness who walked away from the rig heard the news third hand. His warning had reached the boardroom, but not in the way he intended. Share this investigation now. Every year, thousands of workers still descend into the Gulf's industrial depths, knowing no official explanation exists for the vanishings. As offshore drilling expands and technology pushes farther into uncharted trenches, what remains hidden below becomes increasingly relevant to our safety, our energy, and our understanding of life on this planet. The ocean keeps its secrets, but it never loses interest in those who enter. What do you believe is waiting in the dark? Share your theory below.